This video is sponsored by Virtual Gladiators. Virtual Gladiators have everything you need to make your very own Minecraft or Hytale server. Click the link in the description to find out more.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Hycast, the premier Hytale podcast. I'm your host Fezzy, and today we're joined by Codiak from the Game Gurus. Welcome to the podcast. We're glad to have you with us today.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Cool. So, if you don't mind, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are in the Hytale space?
Ooh, the Hytale space. That's an interesting question. Who I am, my name is Codiak. I run the Game Gurus channel, and it's an all-purpose channel. We do a little bit of everything from, shooters and fighters to games like Hytale, and we're really excited to be part of the Hytale community. It's a budding community. It was obviously a lot more active December last year, 2018, but we feel like alongside everybody at Hycast and obviously you, Fezzy, and 30 and all the other content creators out there, we're part of the team that's really trying to keep it a positive place, and it's really exciting to be a part of that. Cool.
So we're just going to kind of jump into a little bit of a meaty discussion here. I know you play a lot of Windcraft.
A lot is that's a tricky phrase.
A decent amount. So let's hop into Hytale as an RPG. Hytale's adventure mode appears to take inspiration from RP games like The Elder Scrolls, for example, based on what we've seen. Do you expect Hytale to appeal to fans of that genre, or do you think it'll be seen like a true RPG? Where do you think it's going to fall in those lines?
Oh, this is the question, right? This is the question for anybody who's following the game from an RPG standpoint. I am currently very perplexed and confused about where Hytale will actually fit into the space. And I think this is kind of the reason why there have been no truly great MMORPGs as of late, because everybody wants something different. If you want something that's World of Warcraft-esque, you're going to piss off all the Elder Scrolls fans and all of the Terra fans and Black Desert fans. But if you want something like that, more of like an Eastern MMORPG, you're going to piss off all of the Western American MMO fans. So where does Hytale fit into that space? I'm hoping it's more than just questing and some like basic secondary skills stuff. I think that's one of my biggest problems with Windcraft as it stands. If I didn't have a great community that plays with me every time I stream, I would be so bored with that game, because questing isn't enough. Well-written quests, while they're fun and exciting, isn't enough to connect a world and make it feel alive. So there's still a lot with Hytale's adventure mode that we don't know about, mainly because we don't know a lot about the systems. We know a lot about, lore, and I mean, even lore we don't know that much about, but we see pretty pictures of all the biomes and some of the characters and NPCs and stuff like that, but we don't know how any of it works. We just know they have these random set pieces that, they have created and crafted, and they'll get plopped into the land if the scenarios are right, and you'll get to experience them. But if that means, like the combat clip we saw, going in there and killing 8 skeletons, I'll tell you right now, that's not enough to fulfill me as somebody who, played 12 plus years of World of Warcraft.
Yeah, 100%. So do you have any specific examples of what you would think Hytale needs to do to appeal to RPG fans?
Oh boy, it really comes down to a couple things, in my opinion. And this is just my hot take. Again, you have to understand that I come from the World of Warcraft world. I played it from vanilla all the way up until the current expansion, Battle for Azeroth. I did not dabble into that. So for me, it starts with that overwhelming sense of adventure and grandeur, right? You have to feel like you're in a world that's bigger than yourself. And now as a 28-year-old, that's probably a lot harder to do than when I was 15 or 16. So I have the rose-tinted glasses on when I talk about this, thinking that Hytale can do just that for me as an adult now. But it has to go beyond that, right? You have to have a really intricate system of gameplay systems that work well together, that give the player a sense of accomplishment pretty much at every corner. I'm not saying they have to let players rule the world within 5 minutes of the game, but they have to make them feel like they're truly going on an adventure that makes sense. One of the things about Windcraft, since we brought it up before, was Windcraft quests are just well-written little adventures, and that's fine, but there's no connective tissue that bridges the gap, that makes these things feel like they're all part of a bigger adventure. And there's, obviously there's limitations within the Minecraft space for all that stuff, but, other MMORPGs have tried to do the same thing and failed. So it's really having that secret sauce of all of your systems working well together, having the game be accessible to casual players and hardcore players, and having enough content in there to keep everybody entertained in one way, shape, or form.
Right.
Sounds easy, right?
Yeah. Well, it sounds easy, but balancing is an incredibly difficult thing. And that's actually what I want to talk about. So like you mentioned, it needs to be accessible to casual and hardcore players. How do you think Hytale should do that from what we've seen so far?
Well, I think casual right now, from everything that I've seen of Hytale, and this is my hot take, so, feel free to skewer me in the comments. Hytale is definitely leaning towards a more casual, creative fan base from everything that we've seen so far. Of course, they have PvP mode, which is going to be very competitive, things like that. And, we have teases of, oh yeah, you've got the deep ocean, it's going to be really intense, blah, 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 blah. That's all fine. That's all fine, well, and good. But what is the end game content? Because hardcore players only stick around if there is a carrot on the end of the string that's attached to the stick, right? If there is nothing to sustain somebody other than that creative, sandboxy type thing, I will say this again, another hot take. I think the sandbox game, the time of the sandbox game, while Minecraft is still incredibly popular, the time of the sandbox game, the open world game, is coming to an end. I think we're going to see just how MMOs were huge 5 years after World of Warcraft. Everybody tried to make one. Everybody tried to capitalize on it. The sandbox survival thing is going by the wayside. I think we see 1 million of them come. Most people don't hear about half of them. So Hytale has a unique marketing opportunity because they have a lot of eyeballs paying attention. Now, you and I are both in a weird position where we've seen the audience come and go. So now what do they do to get them back? Okay, they release another trailer, and who are they tailoring that trailer to? Casual fans or hardcore fans? How are they going to kind of get both of them? It's a really challenging thing. And at this point, I don't think they've done a good job explaining how they're going to do that or what systems are going to be in the game to get both audiences.
Right. So with that said, because there obviously has to be some kind of progression so that there's enough catering to both audiences. If in this theoretical future we have a game that caters to both audiences, do you expect there to be divisions in the community based on what content they prefer to interact with? Or do you think it's going to be like more of a thing where hardcore dungeons players will also find a decent amount of entertainment in like farming or something?
I think that has a large part to do with the community. I think community in an online multiplayer, in this sense, a massive multiplayer, but it's server based. So, there's a little bit of isolation that way. But in some of the more communal spaces, I really do think that the community is the one who sets the tone for a game. League of Legends isn't a toxic game because of the game itself. It's a toxic game because of the community that, what's the word I'm looking for? Perpetuates that kind of mentality around the game. Hytale is going to be a good game because the community supports each other. They support all of the content creators. They support the casual players, and they support the hardcore players. And if we see something that's out of line, if we see people that are belittling other people because, you're casual and I'm hardcore, or I'm hardcore, or I'm casual and you're hardcore, we should stop that immediately. And we should be able to say, hey, there's no reason to be like that. It's not that type of game. We're all here to have a good time and find our own thing out of Hytale. So just knock that off. And I think the community has to be on the forefront of keeping it a positive place.
Right. It's important to make it so it's not toxic, because you're right, there is a lot of toxicity in a lot of games, especially competitive ones. And I know Hytale actually is aiming to have a little more of a competitive side to it. So it'll be interesting to see how that ends up. Now, speaking of competitive play, this is where things are going to get a little dodgy, because we're going to start talking about combat and PvE mechanics.
Oh boy.
So Hytale appears to have not classes necessarily, but items in the game that you can kind of build to make a class with of your own kind of choosing.
Yeah.
And that's a trend that we've kind of seen emerging in MMO and sandbox games. Cube World, for example, has not necessarily classes, but they have classes, right? They have like the different species, but it's kind of all over the place right now in the MMO world in terms of how players get items in their hands. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think it's correct to approach do you think Hytale, it's correct for them to approach it with classes, or have more variety in their choice for weapons, items, abilities, etc.?
So another hot take. I truly believe that the going away from classes is a bad move. overall. I think while it's nice that you're giving players the opportunity to be who they want, equip with weapons what they want, kind of have the identity that they want, what that actually does is strip away that identity. You invest hours and hours of time into these characters, into these, if you're having a class-based system, into these classes that you choose to play, you choose to build and create and work hard to progress with. If you allow anybody to be anything at any time, it takes away the uniqueness of it. And again, you have to remember, I come at this from the World of Warcraft perspective, where I worked my butt off to get max level characters of every class, and every class was different to me. I couldn't just all of a sudden, be on my paladin and then flip a couple weapons around and be a mage. It's just not a thing. So by allowing players to just change weapons on a dime and kind of change their identity on the dime, it actually detracts, in my opinion, from the overall mission of making characters fully immersed in their game. If you give players the keys to the castle all the time, it's no longer, it truly is a sandbox, but it's no longer a truly immersive RPG experience. And for me, that's something that I'm going to have to get over, obviously, with Hytale, or I'm just going to have to find a server that does lock me into a class. Mm-hmm. But I like that. I want to be able to progress with a character and show that I put work into this to get from point A to point B.
Right. And that's also one of the reasons why, having sandbox and MMORPG is really hard to do. Like, if your game has both of those things, it's really hard to pull that off, because like you said, people from MMO scene, they're going to want something familiar. They're going to want classes they can grind for. Also, classes adds replayability, which, means you can kind of go towards, you can make a playthrough as a mage character or whatever. So there's going to have to be a decision made by the Hytale team where they actually figure out which approach they want to take. It seems that they aren't going with classes, but they're kind of make it so you can make classes by your discretion. Now, do you think that kind of style will be suitable for PvE in adventure mode, or would an alternative system like skill trees or something you think work better for that?
I think that having players commit their time, effort, skill points, whatever you want to say, into some sort of progression-based system is good for identity of the player and the character. If you just say it's based on your weapons and that's it, or your gear, it totally strips away that identity. And you may think it's silly to just say, putting a point in shield block doesn't make me feel like a paladin or a warrior. It doesn't make me feel like anything. That's fine, but I disagree with you, because I think that committing something that's finite, right? You only have a certain amount of skill points every whatever, you have to commit them. You have to make a commitment to your decisions to be the character that you want to be. If you can be anybody that you want to be at any point in time, you're just playing a giant digital version of make believe or dress up or wardrobe, whatever the heck you want to call it. And that no longer has nothing special about that. And I know there are plenty of people who do enjoy that. It's just not from a PvE adventure mode perspective, where you're doing quests and you're following a quest line where you're trying to be immersed in their world, but you're wandering and you have no identity, or you can just change your identity on a dime. It doesn't seem to make sense to me. Again, I want to be very clear. This is just my personal opinion. I know a lot of people don't like this about my perspective on these types of games. But I, as I always try and remind people, I come from a very traditional MMO background.
Right. Well, there's a reason those MMOs were popular. There is definitely, you kind of associate with different classes, and your friends associate with other ones, and you almost kind of form a bind between those classes and that friend. So I can definitely see where you find your character within those classes, and I can definitely understand why. Now, moving on to talking about things like secondary skills. Do you expect there to be any in Hytale, or abilities tied to Hytale's combat system, and where do you expect to see those?
Yeah, we already know that secondary skills are going to be something in the game. The real kicker is, are secondary skills going to be deep? Are they going to be, I don't want to say intricate. Intricate's not the right word for secondary skills. I think people try and reinvent the wheel when it comes to secondary skills and make it overly complicated or overly just saturated with gathering materials and things like that. It needs to feel connected to a player's adventure, right? And I don't think any game, and please challenge me in the comments if you know one, has ever done secondary skills quite right for an MMO. You know, you either get a game where you harvest a million minerals and herbs and you have no idea what any of them do because they're all just crazy names and different shapes and stuff, or you have one that's like, it's not quite enough. You've got wood and gem and, you know, lily, but you don't have enough depth to it that it matters. So how do you make secondary skills relevant? Well, that is a damn hard challenge, and I don't have the answer, and I'm not going to pretend to have the answer. I just know that secondary skills are a very big part of a player's experience in the game. Now, one of the arguments, and I'll just throw this kind of out there, one of the arguments that I always hear about secondary skills is that secondary skills have to tie into progression somehow. And I don't think they do. I personally don't think they do. We've seen people play games like Stardew Valley ad nauseum because they just like farming. They just want to be a farmer. They just want that kind of life. So there does not have to be a connection between, you know, farming for food and drink with your PvE progression and endgame content. There should be some connective thread that makes them all relevant to each other, but they don't all have to be, you know, at a point where, yes, your top tier farmers are also pushing your progression, helping your progression in PvE. It just doesn't make sense. But I do agree that secondary skills have to be meaningful. I think that's really what it comes down to, is if I'm just running around the world tapping, you know, nodes because I need some more copper ore for no reason other than I just need to make another axe to sell for some gold, that's not deep and meaningful. That's just grindy and a waste of time.
Right. So like we mentioned, it's a really hard thing to nail down. So do you think the Hytale developers should make it so secondary skills are customizable, and that way the player, for example, like on a server, what I mean by customizable is they can design their own secondary skills. Do you think that's important, and do you think that's something they should do?
I think that the Hytale team should take their crack at secondary skills on their adventure mode, you know, whatever official servers, however they end up doing it. I do think they should let players have some flexibility with it. I don't know, without coding new systems entirely, how it would work or how they would develop new secondary skills systems. Because, you know, once you kind of establish the foundation and the framework, you kind of are stuck with that. But I'm interested to see what the Hytale team thinks is a good secondary skills system. If it's as simple as, you know, gathering and then crafting professions, fine. If that's what it is, that's what it is. That's what it's been for, you know, a decade and a half now of these massive MMO RPG style games. But if they're going to try something different, I'd like to see that too. And if it crashes and burns, I hope we can say to them, hey, you tried this. We appreciate you trying this. It doesn't work. Or here's what's wrong with it. Or here's what's right with it. And maybe if you make these tweaks, it could be even better. And Fezzy, we've talked about this a million times. I mean, their openness to criticism and critiquing is very important for the health of this game.
Yes, 100%. And something that actually probably will happen, because this even happened with Minecraft, is that if there's a problem, this is what's great about having a game that's relatively like open source. You can kind of get into the guts of it and change it. If there's a problem, you can say, okay, here's the problem. I can show you like an example of fixing it. For example, with Minecraft, Mo Creatures. The reason that Mo Creatures influenced Minecraft is because Minecraft let Mo Creatures exist. So it's going to be really important, and I think that's going to be a huge factor in seeing different game mechanics change, is the customization of the game, letting players get in there, change basic mechanics, making them customizable, and showing the devs like, hey, I've improved this system quite a bit, and a lot of the community agrees. So let's see if we can make it into an actual base game mechanic, and, you know, it might actually, I think it leads to better improvement for the game overall.
Yeah, and it brings up an interesting idea, because from your world in the Minecraft world, something like that happens, where in my world, in the World of Warcraft world, you know, mods were created to augment the player's existing experience, right? They weren't allowed to change the existing experience, just augment it to make it more user-friendly or more aesthetically pleasing, something like that. So it's two completely different approaches, and obviously we're going down the mountain on your side of things, where they're giving you the keys to say, hey, here's what this game is, here's what this platform is, have at it. whereas the World of Warcraft side was a lot more closed off. Like, here are some tools that you can develop to kind of aid in the experience that we're crafting for you. So it's two kind of different ways of approaching the modding and the customizable way of things. But both, it sounds like, from your example there with Minecraft and from, you know, my experience with WoW, have shaped the vanilla version, the base version of the game in good ways.
Right. I think if they find a healthy balance between that, I think it'd be a great experience, to be honest.
Yeah, as long as they don't get lazy and just say, hey, you guys keep developing stuff for us,
right,
and we'll implement it.
Right. There's a lot of games that do that. And it
yes,
shows.
there are.
So transitioning to looking forward to 2020 and past that.
Yes.
So as everyone should know by now, there's at least a year wait before Hytale actually comes out. What do you think people can expect to see during this time? And roughly, when do you think they can see it?
Well, having that 2021 target is really important. And you know, there's a lot of noise, especially now that we've only really got the diehards following this game very closely. There's a lot of noise out there. A lot of people are frustrated, whatever. The truth of the matter is there's still a lot that they need to talk about. You know, they can release an alpha or a beta and not tell us anything, and we can just experience it for ourselves. They've said that they don't want to reveal everything before a playable version is out there. That's great, but there is still a ton of information that they need to talk about. There's a lot of systems that they need to talk about, or that they can talk about, I should say. They don't need to do anything, but they can and they should talk about. When it comes to combat, yeah, we saw a clip, but we need to know a lot more about combat. Questing, we need to know a lot more about questing. Lore, we need to know a lot more about lore. I mean, so many intricacies of the game are still completely in the dark. Not to say anything about PvP mode and competitive modes and creative modes. I mean, there's a million different things they can talk about and choose to talk about in 2020. And I think people are going to realize there's not, 12 months is not a long time for anything. I think we see this long stretch ahead of us as, oh my God, I've got to wait this long. But it's not going to be that long. There's a lot of good games coming out this year that are going to distract us. And 2021 and that target date is going to be here before we know it.
100%. So with that year to wait, within the Hytale community, there's not a lot for Hytale fans to latch onto. And a lot of the biggest community projects are either slowing down or some of them stopping completely. What do you think is going to happen to the community during that wait period? And how much of it do you expect to return once Hytale finally does release?
I think we've seen the bulk of the community that was casually following this game already disappear. If you look at Google Trends for Hytale, it's not very up there. It floats between 10 and 20%, I think, or 10 and 20 saturation. So the people that are around are community figures and community followers that they follow all these channels, all the great channels that produce Hytale content. They're with all of us. What frustrates me about being a YouTuber, and I know this isn't the question you asked me, but I'm going to talk about it anyways, is when, you put something out there for a game that people follow you on, and you start to see that, oh, there's not a big following for this game right now, and then you try and do something else and you don't get a lot of traction on it. So there's a lot of frustration from a content creator's perspective. But that's, again, I'm 28, I'm patient. I'm not a 16-year-old hothead anymore that will throw his keyboard across the room because he gets frustrated with one little thing. We've got really big plans on our channel, something that I'm super excited to talk about. Can't talk about it quite yet. We're getting really close though, and that's been firing me up and keeping me going as an individual. And I think the community as a whole understands that we've got a little whiles to wait, but we have good times and good conversations across Discords, across Reddit, and I like to keep seeing that stuff. And again, keeping the community a positive place is really important.
Yeah, 100%. It is going to be interesting to see what happens during that time period with a lot of the existing Hytale communities. We've already noticed a lot of them have left and new ones have come in within that even short amount of time of the last 6 months. So a large amount of the community websites and services have been made during this pre-Hytale idle time, and we've seen a lot of them come and fade as well. Do you expect a lot of these websites to be actually used post-launch, or will they be overshadowed by newer projects that have come in during the mix?
I'm gonna have to be completely honest with you, man. I can't follow everything, right? I'm just one guy that's trying to do his own thing with YouTube on top of a full-time job. So I can't follow every little nuance of the game. I follow games because I love video games. The intricacies of the communities and the people that are trying to make their mark. I have no problem with people trying to do that as long as they're doing that in a wholesome way and they're not trying to take advantage of unsuspecting people. If people want to try and start, wikis and try and do all of this stuff, I get some of it's kind of scummy and some of it's kind of, gougy, but I think there are genuinely good and passionate people in this community that really just are excited about the game. I have never personally got that way about a specific game. I was never the person that, had to be immersed in everything about one particular game. Every second that I'm awake, when I'm sleeping, I'm thinking about the game. When I'm at work, it's just not me. It's just not my personality. But I'm excited that there are people that get excited about stuff like that because that's what helps the community keep that hype going. There's no one individual that can keep a game on track in terms of community presence and hype. So seeing people that continue to preach the word of Hytale is kind of cool. And it's good. And, all Hytale needs to do is reach out to their big content creators. I mean, hopefully one day you and me will get there, man. We're not there quite yet. So you're friggin' rising through the ranks. So one day they're going to be reaching out to you saying, hey, we want you to talk about this thing that we're doing. And we want you to get people on board. And you're going to say, hey, okay, that's cool. Or nah, I'm going to pass. And people will come back. So there's so many marketing ways that they can make this game a success and keep the word going about it. The community is a large part of that. I hope the passionate people in the community stay passionate about the game. But if they don't and they move on to something else, that's okay too, because when the game comes out, they're going to be back. And we know that.
Yeah. And obviously we can't tell the future. It's going to be a very interesting time, I think, coming up for Hytale, because a lot has changed. There's been like a Lord of the Rings movie worth of stuff that has happened before the game's announcement date was even revealed. It's going to be interesting to see where it goes, because so much has happened already and so much more is going to happen, I'm sure. Now personally, I do know that I do want to warn, I think, a lot of people in the Hytale community about the question with services being used post-launch. We don't know of all of the features in the game yet. And for example, there was a lot of people making serverless sites for Hytale, and Hytale revealed that they have a built-in server list. So be cautious, but feel free to have fun with it. I mean, hey, maybe someone can make a server list that's more comprehensive than the one in game, and maybe it'll be used more. You never know. I mean, feel free to shoot for whatever you want to shoot for, but understand that it might be something that the Hytale team's tackling already. So
yeah, one of the things, just to tack onto that's again, I kind of mentioned it before. Hytale is not Minecraft, and Minecraft does not have good integration with other systems. Like the fact that you need a wiki for a lot of things is not common for a lot of games. Especially a game, again, sorry to bring it back to World of Warcraft, you didn't need a wiki for World of Warcraft. You had Thoughtbot at the time, which was, a questing guide, something like that. Then it turned into Wowhead. You have things like that, and sure, they make money in their ways, but WoW had a lot of those tools already baked into the game. And a good RPG adventure mode type game or game mode or server won't need those types of things. Again, you can have mods that augment the experience to make it better, but you're going to be playing on their terms, and to tap in all these different services that people are trying to peddle. It just doesn't make a lot of sense now. So I think at the end of the day, my only 2 cents is just be smart with your money. It's your money. The game is a year away at a minimum. Just be smart and wait for them to say, hey, this is what's coming out there. This is what we're offering. We recognize that people are doing other things. That's fine, but just don't fall for the hype pit, if you will. Yeah. And just be patient.
100% agree with that. So like we said, 2021 is the year, hopefully, that everyone will be able to play Hytale. Do you believe a 2020 launch is still possible if development goes according to plan, or do you think they're going to stick with that year no matter what because they've already put it out there?
I don't think developers are ever locked into a hard date. I think we've seen AAA publishers or AAA developers and publishers move back launch dates. I think we've seen indie companies do it. So
yeah.
Again, this is my 28-year-old knowledge, which is not great, let me tell you. But it's just I don't expect anything. What's the word I always use on when I stream and talk about things? Cautious optimism. I want to be hopeful. I want to be optimistic, but I also am a realist and a pragmatist where, look, if they say they need another year, they need another year. And will that suck for you, me, and everybody else that wants to play this game and make content and do our projects? Yes, of course it does. But that's what they say they need to do. And who am I to tell them otherwise?
Exactly. So the final question, which is a big one,
one
boy. That a lot of people debate about and is still debated about today, the business model for Hytale.
Yes.
What do you think it's going to be? What do you expect out of the investors? Because Riot Games is an investor, and that might lead to it being a more free-to-play experience because Riot, of course, League, a lot of free-to-play stuff. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think the business model is going to be? Because it's very divisive amongst the community.
So it's interesting. I'm starting with a tangent here. I was walking my dog today, and I was thinking to myself as I'm walking around the corner, I'm always trying to think of new video ideas or something unique to do with the channel. And one of the things I was thinking about was, it's not really loot boxes that are the problem. It's players' inability to have self-control. And so, I get a lot of flack for this all the time. I think there are multiple business models that could work for this game. If you want a perpetual world that's constantly getting updates, the company needs to constantly make money. That's just the way it works. So while a subscription model is not popular or the norm anymore, that could be an option. I'm not saying it is an option. It could be an option. I think they would do themselves a disservice if they did that model because a lot of players and people don't do that, especially coming from the Minecraft world. I don't think a lot of those crossover audiences will like that because they're going to be younger. Let's be honest. They're going to be a younger population coming over, and paying $15 a month is definitely not going to be a thing. But when I was 15, I convinced my parents to let me do it. So there you go. I also think that free to play is a slippery slope. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but I would hope that in a free to play type game, they would have no pay to win services. I think they've been very clear that pay to win is not something that they are interested in. So then you just flood the market with cosmetics, and then it kind of becomes just like a shoppy type game. Me personally, if you're trying to create an immersive adventure experience, that's not a great way to do it, but I understand, again, as a 28-year-old pragmatist, that may be an option that they have to pursue because they got to keep the lights on. You can't just expect things without understanding that there is a business and there is an entire mechanism of interconnected pieces that have to go working in sync to make this game happen. Of course, you can go with the indie model, right? $30 or less for a one-time purchase, and then they could do expansion packs or something like that. I could see that working too. I don't dislike the expansion model for World of Warcraft. I dislike the fact that they do the expansion model plus a subscription service. So that is kind of gougy in my opinion. But again, they've lost a lot of subscribers since they launched. So I'm not really answering your question to a fine point, but I'm answering it, I think, in a way that to give people perspective that multiple models could work. I don't think this game will even come close to like a $60 AAA release, sticker price. I don't think that's going to be a thing. I don't think it works for this game. I don't think it works for this audience, and I think they know that. But so what else do you have? You've got free to play with microtransactions. You've got indie model, $30 or less one-time purchase. And then you've got a subscription service or like a season service, I guess could work, but it doesn't really make sense for this game. So you're really looking at three, I guess, foundational models. And the team has been very clear on multiple occasions that they're not ready to commit. And that's because they don't know what's feasible in terms of money and keeping this game alive. That's why they're not committing to something, because if they do, they lock themselves in, or they kind of lock themselves in, right? Like I said, they can change whatever the heck they want. But if they lock themselves in, it makes it a lot harder for them to change down the road.
100%. I agree with that like tenfold, and I think it kind of needs to be something that's up in the air right now, because something a lot of people need to keep in mind is that the gaming industry is a very expensive industry.
Oh yeah.
And one that's continuously getting more expensive. Games are getting more expensive to produce. There are more expectations. Things are getting expensive, you know? And Hytale needs to stand up with that. And the game industry also changes all the time. I mean, to put it in perspective, when Hytale was first announced, loot boxes were still kind of a thing. They were a dying thing, but they were still around. People were still mad, and people didn't want them. Now, the loot boxes are almost gone.
Yep.
Like, loot boxes are almost completely evaporated from the industry, and now a new trend is coming in. So it changes all the time, and people need to keep that in mind, because their business model might change from month to month based on the different industry standard that's around at the time.
Right. And video games and the industry itself is not immune to cycles, right? Just like fashion is a very cyclical industry. Video games are a very cyclical industry as well. You know, there was a time where MMORPGs were king. Then there was a time where battle royales were king. Then there was a time that sandboxes were a king. These things all come back in perpetuity, because we are creatures of habit. As human beings, we gravitate to the things that comfort us, that entertain us, and those things are cyclical. There is only so much new creation people can make, right? We've already invented the wheel. How do we redefine the wheel? That's one thing, but you can't reinvent the wheel. That's why it's a phrase. So the Hytale team has created an ambitious platform, an ambitious game, and they have a very dedicated and I think ravenous audience. And I'll be honest with you, after doing all the survey videos that we've done and things like that, people have a lot of varying ideas, and there is no way that the Hytale base game is going to satisfy all those needs. But hopefully the community can, this is more of a like check on ourselves, understand that these guys cannot deliver every little thing to every person. It's not going to be the perfect game to every single person, and we're going to have to be okay with that, because that's just not the games industry. There's not a single game out there that delivers for every type of player. I mean, everybody, you know, Hytale can try and do that, but to hit that nail on the head is impossible, I think.
Yeah. I think one of the good ending notes for this, for everyone listening, is I really like the cautious optimism you have. I think that's something a lot of people need to understand, because there's a lot of people in this community that have extremely high expectations for the game. I was one of them. When the game was first announced, I was like, I had rose tinted glasses on before the game even came out. Like I was freaking out. I think people need to keep their expectations real, but still be excited, because this game could be great. One of the greatest if they do it right. And I think everyone just needs to keep it real with themselves and look forward to it, because it's probably going to be a pretty fun game at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So with all that said, that's all the questions we had for today. If there's anything else you'd like to say, socials or anything like that, feel free to do so now.
Two quick things. Just thank you if you guys are listening. I'm really excited that Hycast came back and is doing this again, because there's only so much each of us as individuals can do. So having a cool podcasty style format is really fun. And I appreciate you guys having me on for a second time. And second, this is a personal shout out to you, man. Like, congratulations on all the growth you've seen this year. I love having you on the round table, and I hope that you keep climbing and killing it, because you're a great dude. And seriously, I'm excited that we're doing this together, and I'm excited that we're friends, and I'm excited to play Hytale together someday.
Yeah. 100%, dude. Thank you for the kind words. You've been doing good too. I mean, your Hytale videos are doing real well. The channel overall is doing pretty well. And you got. I mean, like you said, you got some plans for Hytale that you're excited for.
We're hanging in there. We're hanging in there.
And I look forward to being on the round table as always.
Yes, sir.
And with that said, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And make sure to follow the Game Gurus on Twitter, and all of their other links will also be in the description below. Thank you for tuning into this week's podcast, and make sure you subscribe if you'd like to hear more. And with that said, this has been your host, Fezzy the Frog, and we'll see you next time.